Hello, everyone. My name is Cat Oriel with Forbes Breaking News, and today I'm here with Ysabel Jurado, a tenants' rights attorney and affordable housing activist running to be the next Los Angeles City Council member for District 14. Ysabel, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kat.
Of course. So tell me a little bit about your background and how it led you to today running for LA City Council.
Absolutely. Born and raised Highland Park here in Los Angeles, still living in the house that I grew up in. I'm a daughter of undocumented Filipino immigrants, and I was a teen mom that put myself through UCLA and community college to become an attorney for my community. So I've defended workers against wage theft like my father faced when he was undocumented, was an eviction defense attorney for renters and small businesses during the pandemic, and watching my neighbors get pushed out. And so running for city council for me is personal. And I believe I have the professional experiences to contribute to help move LA forward.
You've mentioned a few of the most important themes for you, but what was the exact turning point when you knew you wanted to run for city council? Has anyone ever encouraged you to run? I'm always just very curious how the process is for women who decide to run for office, just because there's so many statistics that make it unfortunately more unlikely for qualified women to run, even with someone who has the background and has achieved everything you've achieved. So on top of the familial responsibilities as a single teen mom and the daughter of undocumented immigrants, what was the catalyst moment for your campaign?
The catalyst for me to really push myself to run was the tapes that are now infamous, in which my current council member was caught gerrymandering districts and engaging in racist, homophobic language. And that really was like the moment for me to think that this is the best kind of leadership here in LA that we can show for ourselves. We're supposed to be a trendsetter in terms of like great policies, but we don't have our leaders who walk the walk. And so that really pushed me. But going into it, I guess I didn't fully absorb how much of being a candidate, especially first time, single mom, someone that maybe doesn't come from a lineage of like political people and in that could like lead the way for me. And so really relying on other folks. I mean, the way that we won was not from institutional support. It really was from grassroots support. Like the people that raised me in my community were the ones that were able to launch us into first place. And so really relying on the folks that pretty much raised me to
Right.
get here. Yeah.
Right, definitely not unsurprising as that, made national headlines. Of course, the hot mic moment, as you referenced in 2022. I want to talk about that in a second, but actually, there's a video on the top of your homepage that says District 14 has quote been run by men who've betrayed our trust for decades. So it's not just Kevin De Leon. You're the incumbent there. So what is the history actually? Can you take us back to not just Kevin De Leon, but his predecessor as well?
Yeah, so Councilmember De Leon is the infamous tapes. Before that, we had Councilmember Jose Huizar, who, on the day of one of my launch videos, had been indicted for corruption and is now going to prison for 13 years. The council member before that moved in, ran for mayor, and then left us midterm. And then the council member before that also had to step down because of bribery, fraud, and corruption. And there are multiple council members in this district before that who have been engaged in those kind of illicit activities that has led us down this road of really, constituents not having faith in government, faith in the leadership, and just feeling neglected and sold out.
And then that brings us to 2022. So for those that might not be familiar, can you tell me about the scandal that happened with De Leon that landed him in hot water and why exactly that was a catalyst moment for you?
Yeah, so Kevin De Leon, Councilmember De Leon, then Councilmember Nuri, and also Gil Cedillo and Ron Herrera from the Labor Fed were caught on tape discussing redistricting in the city of LA. And they were discussing it and they were talking about how to consolidate and keep their political power, and it was kind of a selfish enterprise. And during that conversation, they caught, saying some racist things about other council members' children at the time, homophobic statements, also some colorism statements against like Oaxacan communities, which are part of the Latino identity. So it was just really an uproar. Councilmember Nuri Martinez resigned. Gil Cedillo was, got reelected, didn't get reelected, but Councilmember De Leon refused to resign despite ongoing outcries. And so him running again is disappointing to say the least, but I think this community in the city of LA really wants to turn the page on this because it's a huge distraction from the real issues that are affecting Angelenos.
Right. And I would like to talk about the real issues. So beyond the scandal, what is he not doing that you believe that he should be doing to address the concerns of the district?
Yeah, homelessness is the number one concern that's on people's minds. I've lived here all my life and it's just, exploded and it's visible everywhere in the city. Whereas before, it may have just been, concentrated in one area. And in fact, my opponent has, represented Skid Row for the past 20 years, and that problem has not gotten better, right? And we can all agree on that. And so finding a humane solution, working with the homelessness nonprofits and mutual aid groups to actually enact solutions that will help people really get off the streets and get off for good. Affordable housing, look, I still live in the house that I grew up in, with my dad and my daughter. And I think, housing affordability for all people at different income levels is important, and making sure that we continue to fight for those. And also, at the end of the day, my job is about street lighting, paved streets, and we're heading into a budget deficit and trying to make sure that we have those when in certain parts of the district, 60% of the lights are out. And so how can folks feel, safe or cared for by their local government? And so really, looking at our budget, make sure we can provide these to the constituents is super important.
We kind of dove right into it. So I do want to take a step back since, my audience is more typically a national audience. And so people who might be unfamiliar with LA City Council, can you just tell us, you mentioned it a little bit already, but what the City Council does in particular? And, in this role, if you're elected, what decisions would you be making? And how do the implications of a local government like the LA City Council, actually, what implications would they have statewide or even nationally?
Yes, that's a great question. City council, there are three main buckets where I put the role, right? And the first one is providing city services, clearing out the trash, putting on the lights, repaving your streets. Those are the basic quality of life issues that a council member does in your neighborhood. The second is citywide policy, like should we raise the minimum wage? Should we control the rent? What are the different kinds of industries and the permits we need to do there? Those are the big issues that citywide we think about. And third one, oh, I guess I have four. Third one is deciding what happens in people's neighborhood development. Like, what is the land in CD14 going to be used for, the needs and the wants of the communities, and really working in tandem with the community, or they should. And then the fourth is the bully pulpit, right? LA City Council, when we draft policy, we're considered the progressive bellwether of the nation. And even our rent control ordinance is something that other folks have imitated in their own cities and adapted. And so, we need progressive leadership here that reflects our values in front of the doors, behind the doors, so that we can enact these policies that really will benefit not just Angelenos and Californians, but really, nationally push the agenda forward.
And you've touched on this a little bit already as well, but how would you translate your experiences, especially as a tenant rights attorney, if elected as city council member, and what would your top priorities be?
Yeah, uplifting the voices of renters and marginalized voices in neighborhoods in this district is so important. And so a central component of our campaign, even now, and would be in the office, would be co-governance, which just means that, like, governing is a relationship between the people being governed and the person doing the governing, and we need to be in open communication. And so working with these marginalized groups, making sure we bring them to the table when an ordinance comes on our desk to say, like, what does this mean to you and what do you think, right? Especially when it comes to development. Development to me is backwards. I liken it to baking a cake, which is community is brought in, especially, let me just caveat, especially in communities of color that have historically just been developed over. Development is backwards and communities are brought in at the end of baking the cake and asking, like, what sprinkles do you want? When in reality, communities should be brought in for the ingredients, right? And so turning that process on its head by co-governing with these historically marginalized communities so we can make sure that they get what they need, and then we can get all these other wants too.
And that sounds related to, your major mission of planning to rebuild trust among the community when it's been, as we've mentioned before, betrayed for so many decades. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's just, I'll put it plainly. I ran in this race. I've never run before. I ran against 3 seated elected officials, 2 assembly members, the current incumbent, and I came out first after knocking 85,000 doors and only had like maybe like $400,000 and got spent like double. And so when people ask us what our magic sauce is, I was like listening to people
Mhm.
and not being a politician and cut from that mold, and really just earning people's trust. And so that's how I think what our success has been,
Mhm.
and that's how we'll continue to operate because that's who we are. But yeah, to regain people's trust.
So what can we expect to see from you in the future? Do you have statewide or federal ambitions? What can we expect from your career?
I do not. I am a local girly. I've stayed in the home that I lived in, and I don't think I'm going to leave. And I'm really committed to, acting, think global, act local, and continuing to help the people in my community and working in coalition with state and national legislators to figure out what are the best local policies and really think about best strategies. But you can find me still here.
What's one thing you wish that anyone, maybe from Los Angeles, in California, around the country, should know about your district?
Oh my gosh. One thing that they should know. Only one thing.
It could be more than one. There are several things that you
I
think should
mean,
be highlighted.
okay, so there are so many things. We are considered the fashion capital of the nation. This is where American garment workers are centered here in Los Angeles. The fashion district. We have so much districts in this district. I'm constantly amazed at it because we have the jewelry district, we have the flower mart, and we have like a piñata district just for piñatas. And like, but at the same time, we have Little Tokyo. And so just like, the diversity that is within this neighborhood, you can travel to so many different countries in this district without leaving LA. And I think that's the best part of it. Because there's Old Pueblo, there's Little Tokyo, there's the Filipino Mall, also known as Eagle Rock. And those are kinds of things that I don't think you can get anywhere else.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely a very unique and diverse district for sure. Well, that's the end of my questions. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to add before we close?
I want to thank you so much for having me. This historic election, this is the furthest a Filipino candidate has ever gotten to city council. So we're breaking the bamboo ceiling, as it were. And I would be the first woman to represent this seat and the only openly queer council member here in LA. And so this is huge for all of those communities. And so, I really appreciate you taking the time, and we're excited to win this race.
Thank you so much for your time today, Isabel.